Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, wherever you are in the world. I promised you that I was going to start and do a series of music, little fun music videos, and well, here we are with the first one. First of all, I hope you're all well and that everyone is safe and healthy. What are we going to do today then? Right, okay. I attempted to make a video yesterday actually, and it was a nightmare with the internet connection. I just hope that you can all see me and hear me now today. And what I'm going to do is show you some popular albums that were released from 1970 to 1979. So these are not necessarily probably the best albums that were released over the period, but they are popular. And what I've decided to do is it's one album per year and one artist, apart from one. So it's been difficult. And the years that I had a real difficulty with were certainly 72 and 73. A lot of great albums released in those years. So I'd love to see your comments about, Alan, no, I don't agree. I think that this album or that album is better. Please do, and whatever comments you've got, I would love to see. Bad, good, or indifferent. Okay, let's kick the thing off then. I'm hoping that some of these selections are maybe ones that you maybe bought in your youth, or maybe you've nicked from your mum and dad, or an auntie, an uncle, a brother, a sister, possibly. The one I'm starting off with, I've cheated slightly because 1970 was a year that all sorts of great albums were released. But I've nicked this one. Can you see that? That is Motown Chartbusters Volume 4. And that was nicked off my mum and dad. My mother, really. And the reason I picked it is because it was so popular. It was those people that don't know this series of compilations. It started in 1967 and they did 12 right through to 1972. This particular one in 1970 was the first one to go to number one in UK, and it was number one in UK for 13 weeks in 1970. Can you believe that? And that's the reason I picked it. I could have picked loads of different individual albums, but no, this is the one for me that was very, very popular. I'm sure some of you maybe have one, maybe two of them because they were very, very popular. But there's some fantastic tracks on here, isn't there? Let's just go through the artists with you. Jackson 5, Marvin Gaye, Tammy Terrell, Four Tops, The Supremes, Temptations, Marvin Gaye on his own, Stevie Wonder, of course, Diana Ross and The Supremes, Jimmy Ruffin, Four Tops, Temptations, of course, Junior Walker, All Stars, and Diana Ross on her own, some fantastic tracks on here. Really, really great stuff. And, when, I don't know if you're aware that it was Motown did a deal with EMI back in UK. And at the time of some of these singles coming out, and as with all of them, they don't concentrate on one year. In this particular case, 1970, of course. No, they mix and match it all up. In this particular case, it's 65, 68, 69, and of course, 1970. So, some of the people at the time were buying these singles back in Europe, UK, and they were paying a fortune for these particular singles, you know, because they were all deemed as imports. So EMI came up with the idea, got hold of Motown, and said, "Look, can we not put them all together? You know, the popular tracks of the day, and put them on a compilation." Great idea. It did, of course, and when you think about it, well, Tamla Motown didn't spend any money, did they? Because the music was already there. All they had to do was get a compiler, someone to come up with a lovely record sleeve design, which this is, of course, and they all are very, very nice, and pump it out. And when you consider that Motown were probably one of the first ones to do this sort of thing, you had greatest hits of a particular artist that had been done before, Dylan and all these sort of people, you know, but nothing with various artists at the time. So they were the sort of leader in that particular area, and they were great, you know. And what I do like about these European ones, anyway, for those people that are watching from anywhere else, they had an introduction at the back of the thing. I don't know if you can see that there. And the introduction here by the DJ of the time was a chap called Tony Blackburn. And each of them, apart from a few, had these introductions by, you know, popular DJs, and I quite like that. You know. Okay, so there we are. The first one, 13 weeks at #1 in England. I don't know what it was like in the rest of Europe. I'd have to check. I'm sure maybe some of you will let me know. Okay, 1978. Putting that to one side. Moving along to 1971, certainly in UK, and I'm sure around the world, you know, there were bands that were making singles that were hugely successful. But very few of the singles bands that were successful were successful with making albums as well. You know, I mean, the big ones that were certainly in UK and Europe were Slade, Sweet, were another one, but their albums that they put out were not really successful. It was the singles that were successful. However, with this particular band and this particular chap, the albums transpired to be just as successful as the singles that they were making. And I believe that 1971, you know, if you want to put your own thing, was this chap's year. You see that? Very difficult, isn't it? That's Electric Warrior by T-Rex, and that's the other side of the label. Hopefully you can see that. There's Mark and there's Mickey. I don't have the cover because I lent this to my brother, and for some bizarre reason, he got the record back. Didn't get the sleeve. I nearly throttled him. But there we are. That's it. I mean, what's on here then? You know, I mean, the Get It On was a huge worldwide hit. Jeepster was the same thing. You know, Life's a Gas seems to be people's favourite, but it wasn't a hit single. It was a B-side, actually. But the rest of the album is just such a classic record. And I think you could argue that 71 and then perhaps 72 were Bolan's years, really. Maybe into 73 slightly, but no, I think that was the year for him, really, at the end of the year. I really do like, can you see that? The fly on there, which was designed by a great record cover designer called, well, an artist actually himself, called Roger Dean. He did all the typography there, and people probably know him for his sleeves with Yes, Green Slade, and many Ossipis is another, many other bands. You know, very, very distinctive, wonderful artist. Okay, so 1971. Then I think that's the year of Marc Bolan. Okay, 72 then was very, very difficult for me because again, it's one of these years where artists who were established, I think you could say, were issuing classic material from their catalogues, and a lot of the bands that were around at that time and are still in existence now are still playing material from that period, because it's such a classic time, I thought, anyway. So for me to pick this album was just difficult because there's so many others, and I'd like to see who you think are. But I think, along with Mark Boland, I think 1972 belonged to this chap, David Bowie. And obviously, do I need to tell you what it is? You take away the text there, and I think everybody knows what it is. It's Ziggy Stardust, isn't it? Very iconic sleeve, a little bit like a few others that are out there that as soon as you see it, you know what it is. You could argue that a lot of fans out there said, well, the two albums he did before this, Hunky Dory, the previous year in 71, great album. And the one before that, Man Who Sold the World, great album. But what we're talking about here is, popular albums, and this sold bucket loads, didn't it? Let's be honest, So it was a very, very popular album. And I think it's popular because it's great. It's a really, really great album. For those people that don't know the show, there was a great pop show in the UK. Might have been shown in America, don't know, but it was called The Old Grey Whistle Test, and it was the only place that people of a certain musical tastes could watch great bands playing. Some were playing live, some were miming, and certainly that was where I first saw David Bowie, because he did 5 years and Moon Age Daydream from this album on there live, and it was tremendous. And then a couple of weeks later in UK, we've got this thing called Top of the Pops. I think you've all heard of that. And that's where I think everybody saw Bowie doing Starman. And I think that's really the track that burst him onto the scene. And, he took off from there, really, didn't he? Not that he wasn't successful previous, but when this came out, because let's be honest, everybody bought Starman and then bought that. Quite right too, because it's great, my favourite track off here, It Ain't Easy, the last track on the first side. I don't know where he's. I've not seen any live footage of him doing that. There might be something out there, I don't know. But it's such a, the way that the material just flows into one another is tremendous. And sadly, the other three Spiders, as they were known, Bowie got rid of them 2 albums down the line. He did obviously Aladdin Sane, and then pin-ups with the 3 of them: Mick Ronson, Trevor Bolder, and Mick Woodmansey, and then that was it. Okay, everybody knows, I think, that Mick Ronson's such a fantastic guitar player, no longer with us, of course. But people forget how great Trevor Bolder and Mick Woodmansey were. They were a fantastic rhythm section. So they tend to get forgotten a little bit, which is sad. But who can deny that Bowie didn't have a tremendous career, because he did, But I think this is one of his greatest albums that he did. Fabulous album. And I think you could argue that 72 belonged to this man. There's loads of other albums out there I could have included. Really, there could have been. But I had to go with the very, very popular one, certainly in Europe. Not sure how well it did in America. I think it was big in America as well, wasn't it, at the end of the day? So this was the album that really, you could argue, launched Bowie big time. Okay, to give it its full title, The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. There we go. Okay, 1972 then. Let me tell you, chaps, ladies out there, I think this probably was the most difficult choice I had to make, because I've said on a few occasions to friends of mine that I do honestly believe that for popular music, when you look at the albums that were released in 1973, it's just incredible. Really incredible. We're talking popular music here. So it was a very difficult choice, this one, but I had to go with what I believe was. There are others, don't get me wrong, but I believe that this album was the most popular. You see that? Of course you can. Do I need to tell you what it is? I don't think I do I? Really? At the end of that, I think everybody knows what that is. And the fact is, let's be honest, there's no name on it. You don't know unless you well, you doesn't know what it is, but it's just that image. That's it. There's nothing on the sleeve to tell you who it is, what album it's called, or anything. But everybody knows who it is. And for me, the whole package is just fabulous. I mean, we all know it. I think everybody's got it, haven't they? And then, of course, inside you've got the stickers and the posters that came with it. I think the whole package was great. But let's forget the package for now and look at the music. The music is fabulous, as we all know. But there's one song hero, I think, on this album, and that is Claire Torrey, who sang the wonderful "The Great Gig in the Sky." When you consider that she sang it on her own, there's no words, and of course you've got the wonderful arrangement by Rick Wright, who actually wrote the piece as well. It's just tremendous. Not to say that the rest of the material is not great, because we all know that it is, but I do honestly believe that Claire Torrey doesn't get the credit that she deserves. And when you consider that when Floyd went out, certainly on the last two tours they did before they called it a day, for them to perform The Great Gig in the Sky, they had at least three singers. And great that they were. I saw them on both those tours, But, when you consider that they had to get three vocalists in to do what Claire Torrey did on her own, that's the quality of that particular piece of music, I think. So I don't think she gets the credit that she deserves. Again, on this album, there's so many people that were involved in the making of the album that were sort of the beginnings of their career, and they went on to do great things after. I mean, obviously the main one being Alan Parsons. Yes, he'd done a few albums before this one, but I think he made his mark on this. And then, of course, a couple of years down the line, he formed his own Alan Parsons project, and they were very successful. Another one on here is Chris Thomas. He was the mixing supervisor on here, so he wasn't, a producer. But when you consider the records that Chris Thomas went on to make, it's tremendous. I mean, Never Mind the Bollocks by Sex Pistols, he produced that, and when you consider what he got out of the two musicians that were the only players on that album, other than Johnny Rotten singing, it's tremendous what he produced there. And then, of course, other bits and bobs as well. And then Peter Jones was the assistant engineer on here. He went on to do loads of different albums in his own right as a producer and an engineer as well. So you had all these people on there involved in the making of the album. And they went on to do great things, But it's the quality of the recording, isn't it, really, at the end of the day? There are other albums out there that are great sounding. It always seems to be that people go to that, particularly, if they buy a new hi-fi, high-end or whatever it might be. They always seem to go for this album because it seems to be the one that can test your hi-fi. There are others out there, don't get me wrong, there are other great sounding albums, but seems to be the one. And let's be honest, it's one of the most, is it one of the most, it is, I think it's, along with Thriller and AC/DC, I think, Black and Back, probably one of the best-selling albums of all time. Quite right too, because it's great. It is a fantastic album. There are so many other albums in 1973 that were released. I'm sure many of you could list. But could you argue that that's not the most popular one? Probably yes. It probably is. I don't consider it the best. It's an absolutely fantastic, fabulous album, but for me, there's another one. And maybe I'll show you what that one is in a later film. But there we are. 1973 then. Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. Okay. Again, 74 was a little bit easier, I think, maybe, than the previous year. But there seems to be, again, it was in Europe and maybe in America as well. There's a lot of bands that were sort of heading the way and making great singles, but not particularly great albums. But certainly in UK and in Europe, I'm not sure how popular this was, but this was hugely popular, and we are talking about popular albums here. But everybody seems to have bought in 1974 Supertramp, Crime of the Century, and I think most people bought it because of the track Dreamer, which was a massive hit. In my opinion, it's the weakest track on the album. Not to say that it's a bad track, because it's a good track. It's a great track, actually. And the whole album just flows into one another, doesn't it? It's just a great album. The opener, School, is just fabulous. Rudy takes you on a train journey, doesn't it? And what I really like about this album is the inner, not the sleeve, but it's like a little poster type thing with that image on. I really, really like that. And the cool thing about this, I thought, I hope you can see that. Maybe just about. It's got white text and it's got yellow text. And the white text is Roger Hodgson's vocals that he wrote. And the yellow text is Richard Davis, the other vocalist in the band. So I thought that was a nice little touch. The big ones on here for Rick Wright, of course, was Bloody Well Right. Great song. And there's not many of them songs that they sort of blend into one another, apart from maybe, let's have a think. Let's have a look. Hiding Your Shell, they both sing on that, School a little bit. But predominantly, they've got their own material on there, And legend has it that they never wrote anything together. They brought each other's songs into the project, and that was it. Very interesting. But yes, it's deemed as a classic, and it is a classic. It's a great, great album, and everybody bought it. They really, really did. In UK and America, it was very, very successful in America. Super album, lovely, great cover. Let's be honest. Again, I think if you were to take that text away from the top of the sleeve, everybody would tell you what it is. It's that iconic. It's a bit like Dark Side. You just take that bit away there. Let's try and do that for you. And just show people, see that? Show people that image. I think they'd know what it is. Okay. 1974 then, that's Supertramp. Okay, coming up to halfway through the decade then. 75 then was a great year. Great year for albums. Again, established artists were coming through and producing great records, And in this particular case, this chap's on his third album here. And then I think it was the previous year that one of the chaps from Rolling Stone magazine, I think, went to see this particular chap wherever he was playing, probably in America somewhere, and said, I have seen the future of rock and roll, and that future is Bruce Springsteen. Could you argue with that? Not really, I think. Certainly, I bought his first two albums, and I really, really enjoyed them. Coming back to this um, program I mentioned, Old Grey Whistle Test back in England, they played the odd track. I don't think they had any footage of him, but I thought, wow, that's pretty good. So I did buy the first two albums, and I really enjoyed them. You know, and of course, what he was doing up until maybe you could argue this album, he was mixing and matching some of the musicians in the E Street Band, because of course it's just credited with him on this. Obviously, Clarence has been with him right up until this, and then obviously beyond that. But the thing I like about this album, he did mix and match it a little bit. He brought the Brecker brothers in from the jazz world, along with David Sanchez, great piano player. And then, of course, he brought in David Sanborn as well, you know. And I think it gave that little bit of an extra touch to the material. The material is all great, don't get me wrong. It is. But I think with those four individuals that he brought in, I think he brought that extra little bit of, very difficult to put my hand on it, but it did. It brought out the quality of the material. The one that does it for me on here is Jungle Land. And the way that the thing builds into a huge crescendo after crescendo, and then Clarence comes in with his sax solo. It's just incredible. You know, I think it probably is one of the finest sax solos in a modern rock piece of music. You know, very fortunate to see Springsteen on his Born in the USA tour. I hated that album. I'm sorry, I hated it. But you know, I saw him back in UK in a place called Leeds in Roundhay Park, massive park. And the man played for nearly 5 hours, you know, and he did Jungle Land that night, and it was incredible. In fact, the whole concert was, you know, very much a showman. And sometimes it's one of my negative points with him, I think, really. There's not many I can pick with the man. You know. He tends to sort of over dramatise some of the material, and I think he should let the music talk, really, sometimes. He goes on a little bit. And I'm sure it's entertaining. It is entertaining to a degree for me personally, you know, because it is a personal choice, remember. But you cannot get away from the fact that the material on this album is really, really great. You know, Thunder Road, what a fantastic track that was. I don't know if it was a single in Europe. I think it was in America. Born to Run, of course, the title track. You know, we all know that, you know, all the songs on the album. Those people that are fans of Bruce Springsteen. But there were so many albums coming out in 1975, but I don't think you can deny that maybe that was the year for Bruce Springsteen, really, because he did hit the big time with this, didn't he, at the end of the year. Although after this album, it was he was a chap, Mike Apple, gave him all sorts of problems, didn't he? And then he couldn't record and couldn't perform for 2 years, was it, until the next album in '78, so it's 3 years later, you know. Darkness on the Edge of Town, of course, was the next one. But there was such a gap there, you know, and that was all down to Mike Apple, which was a bit of a, I'm sure it was a real pain in the ass for Bruce, that is, anyway. But, of course, that album, the next one, Darkness, was one that I think he formed the proper E Street Band, and off they went from there. You know. But this is such a great album. Great album. 1975, so we're halfway through. 76. I've mentioned to people that know me in other films that I've done on other sort of platforms that this particular year And maybe the end of the previous year, I was being introduced to all sorts of different types of music. From, excuse me, from punk, which I really took hold of, a bit of a punker in the time, to, sort of jazz rock, fusion, classical music, avant-garde, ambient, all these sort of forms of music were just being coming at me from all angles, and it was great. However, what stayed with me since I was very young was soul, funk, Motown. That's never left me. I still love it. And when this artist brought this album out, he'd had a fantastic run of albums in the 70s until he hit us with this monster. I could have picked any of them, really, to be perfectly honest, in all the other years that I've shown you, all the way through, really. But I think at that time it was a niche, and what I'm trying to give you is a popular view. So the record buying public in general were buying all these albums, regardless of the genre of music, because they were popular albums. And when Stevie Wonder hit us with this, don't forget he had such a fantastic run of albums. But this, and don't forget, it's a double. It's got an EP inside as well. Is there a bomb track on there? No, there's not. For me, it's all great. It's all absolutely fabulous. But it's the third song that does it. I mean, isn't she lovely? What an amazing tune that is. I believe it's got the greatest harmonica solo ever recorded on a song. I think everybody knows the single sort of cut version of the piece, which is great, but to listen to it in its full format, it's on here, on this album. I think it's just short of 8 minutes, something like that. The harmonica solo keeps going and going and going, and it's just incredible. And you're hit with this 8 minute epic, and you think, oh my life, can it get any better than this? Well, yes, it can, because Stevie just hits us straight away after that with Joy Inside My Tears. What a song that is. And then to end the side, you've got him banging out straight between the eyes with Black Man. Absolutely incredible. It really is. And when you consider that, okay, Stevie, you could argue, brought in more musicians on this than he'd done previously. But predominantly, don't forget, Stevie does everything on here, apart from a very few musicians coming in and putting this to it, that to it, whatever it might be. Predominantly, it's Stevie, which is incredible in itself, isn't it, at the end of the day? But, when I first bought, I mean, this is battered, by the way. You can see that. I've played it to death. I really have. I should get another copy on vinyl. Anyway, that's another thing. When I saw the EP, I thought, it's just going to be throwaway material, No, it's not. I mean, on the EP, what have you got? You've got Saturn on and Ebony Eyes on the first side. Fabulous songs. And then on the second side, you've got this All Day Sucker, Easy Going Evening, My Mama's Call. Tremendous piece of music that is. So if you think you're getting throwaway stuff with an EP, no, you're not. I mean, look at that. I mean, look at the sleeve. And then, of course, you've got this fabulous booklet inside. You can see that? With all the lyrics and all the the things about the making of the album and all the people that want to, thank him. And it's tremendous, isn't it, really? What a great package. And you could argue, it's certainly one of the best double albums, I think, out there, isn't it, really, at the end of the day? I don't think there's many albums that double that can sort of match this. There is some great ones out there. I don't think there's many out there that can match this as a double album. So, and of course, everybody bought it. It was a huge success. Yeah, there was great albums released in that year as well. I could have picked quite a few, but I'm talking about Poppy. This, I think, was one of the populars. I honestly believe, I don't think there's anybody that recorded a better album than this in '76. So I think that year belonged to the magic, the wonderful Stevie. Okay, '77 then. Certainly in UK anyway. I'm not sure about America or anywhere else, but it's certainly the year of punk. You could argue the end of '76 was the beginning of it and all that. But of course, that was the year of the Sex Pistols, Never Mind the Bollocks, which is such a fantastic debut album. But it did sell a lot of records. I'm not going to deny that, but it was of a niche of people. So it was all the punks and the people like me that were, oh, that's interesting, I'm going to buy this, And of course, a lot of people bought it because of the singles that were released before that album came out. But what we are talking about here is popular albums, aren't we? I think when this group hit us with the monster that I'm about to show you, I don't think anybody expected it to be as good as what it is, really. Mid-career, they'd already done 3 or 4 albums previous to this. People knew that they were good. The previous albums were all very, very good. But when they hit us with this monster, I'm talking about ELO, Out of the Blue. And I've even got inside here, let me try and show you it. It came, the originals came with a spaceship, and you had to sort of cut it all out and build it and all that. And it's over there in the corner. That's how much I really like this album. So that's all the paraphernalia that was left behind when you took all the pieces and built the wonderful spaceship. I mean, before we talk about the music, of course, I've got to show you the cover. I mean, the cover is just extraordinary. You like your science fiction, see that? Look at that. And then, of course, inside you've got the inside of the spaceship. There we go. Tremendous, tremendous cover. Forget about the package then. What's the music like? Well, the music is tremendous, isn't it? It's nearly as good as Stevie's double album, really, because we are talking a double album. The thing that stands out for me is the third side, a little bit like Stevie again, and it's this concerto for a rainy day. And it begins with Standing in the Rain, Big Wheels, Summer and Lightning, and of course, everybody knows this one, Mr. Blue Sky, but it all merging together as this concerto, and it's fabulous. But I mean, you've got such great tracks on here. I mean, everybody knows Turn to Stone, Sweet Talking Woman. What else have we got on here? Wild West Heroes, and I mean, they're all great singles, and everybody bought them, and then we bought this. Such a great album, and okay, people said, well, it sounds too much like the Beatles. Okay, I could, agree with that comment, but it's ELO, it's Jeff Lynne, and when you consider that Jeff Lynne has worked with the Beatles, they love it. And when you look at what it's gone on to produce with Paul McCartney, George Harrison, obviously Ringo, when they were together and they did all the archive series, he was involved in that. And he's done a lot of work with George before he passed away, of course, So that you cannot take away the quality of Jeff Lynne, but the songwriting on this album, again, there's not a duff track here. There really isn't. And I think when people bought this album because of the cover, and of course they may have bought, I think it was Mr. Blue Sky, I think, really, and Turn to Stone, everybody bought, oh, that's good. And when they saw that cover, they went, oh, I'll have some of that. Not thinking that, it's going to be any better than the sync? Well, yeah, it is. I think a lot of people hooked onto that. The thing I really like about this album as well is that Jeff utilised the proper strings of the Electric Light Orchestra. Okay, yes, there's some keyboard effects and things which work really, really well, but in future albums he tended not to use the strings that much and utilised a lot of keyboard effects, and I think he lost a little bit of oomph, I thought, of the orchestra, which this utilises a lot. I saw them on this tour in Wembley, and they utilised the stage was the spaceship. Brilliant it was. The top of the spaceship opened up at the beginning of the show, and then they played the show, and then this top came down of the spaceship and just closed, and that was the end of the show. Great effect. Great show as well. Not long enough, I have to say, but there we go. So, ELO then brought this monster out in the year, certainly in UK and maybe in Europe. Not so sure about America. I think they bottled onto it later, of punk. But this great pop album came out in the middle of all that, and it's amazing that that it was so popular. Yes, I think it did outsell. Never mind the bollocks. That did sell a lot of records, but it's outsold it. Okay, right. ELO then, Out of the Blue, 1977. 78 then. Great year as well. We're talking established artists. There was one debut album that came out. I think most people bought it as well, but I think this particular artist that I'm going to show you, she outsold them. The debut album I'm talking about is Dire Straits. That came out in 1978. And who can deny that that's not a great album? Because it is. Lots of people bought it. But this year, 78, was the year that the world was introduced to a national treasure, certainly in the UK, and maybe even the world. And that treasure is Kate Bush. And of course, everybody was introduced to Kate Bush by Wuthering Heights. For me, I liked the song, but I thought that the mix of Kate's vocals was an octave too high for my liking. So I enjoyed the song, but the song for me that did it, and I think for a lot of other people as well, was The Man with a Child in His Eyes. When I heard that song, bump, that's me. I am going to buy this album and investigate. I didn't know anything about the woman at all. I just bought this on the strength of The Man with a Child in His Eyes. However, typical me, I started to look at the back of the album, and there it all is. Bought it in Germany, and then I looked at it and I went, Dave Gilmour's on here. Oh, well, it's got to be good then, isn't it? I played it, and of course, it's great. There's some great playing on here. David Gilmour plays on a few of the tracks, but not every one of them. The two that stand out on here for me, I don't know if anybody remembers a group called Pilot. They had a massive single, January, and Magic was another single as well. And they play on here, and the two chaps I'm talking about are Stuart Elliott and David Payton. They formed Pilot. Once Pilot sort of binned it in 75, both those two artists went on to Alan Parsons' project and played on a few of his albums. In fact, David Payton sings on quite a few of the songs. So there's a sort of link going on here. Let's go back to this album then. Some lovely tracks on here. James and the Cold Gun, I thought was a fabulous track. Them Heavy People, I thought was very interesting, and The Kick Inside, the title track, was fabulous. It's not a best album by any stretch of the imagination. I think a lot of people would probably agree with that. But what a great introduction to the woman, and you look at the career that she's had is tremendous. I'm sure she's going to get some sort of award from the Queen at some stage. She really deserves it, you know. But this was the introduction um, to the world of this great woman, Kate Bush. The Kick Inside is the album. Fabulous stuff, really, really was. You know, there's some great albums released that year. Like I said, the Dire Straits thing, I think, took off big as well. World was introduced to that band. But you know, when you look at the longevity and the popularity, of course, you know, I mean, people wait on tender hooks for the next thing that Kate's going to do. You know, I mean, when you look at the gap that she had in performing live, and then she came back and did, was it 21 shows? I think it was, and they were all sold out within, God, hours, was it? 21 nights in. Oh, now then, where was it? The Hammersmith Odeon, was it? I think something like that in London. Completely sold out within hours. I mean, I'd have loved to have gone, but there's no way I could get a ticket. Not a chance. You know, and for people, you know, just love her, and for a reason. She's brilliant. And, you know, when you consider as well, it's all the raw material, music and lyrics. There's no one else involved in the writing process whatsoever. She's done the odd cover, but there's not many of them, really. And then when you consider who the hell can cover a Kate Bush song, I don't think there's many of them out there, is there? Really, at the end of the day, because she's such a great vocalist, you know, and it's such the material is such demanding material as well. You know. But there we are, Kate Bush, 1978. So we're coming along then to the last selection, and this was particularly hard, actually, because certainly in Europe and perhaps America as well, it was 78 and 79 was the year of disco. You had the Bee Gees. Let's be honest, they were a phenomenon, weren't they? And then you had Chic that were out there. But Chic were slightly different to Bee Gees. Bee Gees had successful albums, really successful albums, as well as the fantastic singles that they were doing in that era. But Chic was slightly different, releasing absolutely brilliant singles. And in my opinion, anyway, great albums, but they weren't selling that much, you know. The album that I was going to show you, and I think some of you may agree with this, was Earth, Wind and Fire, I Am. What a fabulous album that was. And loads of people bought it. But what I've decided to do is stick with another UK, I know it's UK, national treasure, because people love him so much. He's no longer with us, of course. And that national treasure, certainly in England, is this man, Ian Dury. Typical Ian Dury, he had some fantastic singles that were made at the same time of this album, the biggest one being Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick. But Ian, true to his values, said, Oi, I don't want any singles on here because the record buying public have already bought the singles, they've invested the money, so I want to give them new material. I don't want to repeat the stuff because it's ripping them off. And it's such a great thing to come up with, you know. So all the albums by Ian Dury have got no singles on there, and I think it's a great thing, actually. So it makes you want to go out and buy the singles and then buy an album that's got different material on it. Great. I think a lot of other artists should take note of that, actually. But I mean, everybody wants cheering up, don't you? You know, I mean, is there a depressing Ian Dury song? No. He makes whatever the subject is telling us about, he makes it funny, you know, very, very funny. And he's, you know, he was such a lyricist, brilliant. The one on here is This Is What We Find. I think it was Kevin came home to find some other gentleman's kippers in the grill. So he saw off his winkle with his Black and Decker drill. What a line of a song. these songs, some of them just make you laugh out loud when you hear the lyrics. So good. But the Blockheads, what a set of musicians. Oh, mate, Chas Jankel. What a, again, he doesn't get the credit he deserves, that man. He's such a brilliant musician, as they all are. And every single track on here, I could name them all. I'm not going to, because we're on 50 minutes. It's brilliant. But I've got to Dance of the Screamers. I mean, if you don't laugh out loud to that, it's so funny. So funny. But it's such a funky, jazz inflected album. It's got a bit of dance hall type material on there and influences. Bit of reggae on there, you know. But finally, I have to mention that this, can you see that design? Well, this design on here, in England, we had a thing called the Crown Wallpaper Company. And in 1979, when this came out, of course, they had 800 and odd different types of wallpaper designs and stiff records, bonkers that they are. And it was Ian that suggested it. When you look at the bottom edge on here, it will give you the crown design and the number of this particular thing. And they did the whole lot of them, over 800 different covers, this, and it's all different wallpapers. Oh, it was so funny. Only Ian Drury and Stiff Records would get away with that. So, you know, half the time you look at this album and you go, hang on a minute, that's a different cover. It's a different wallpaper on it. So there we are. That's 1979. I would have really, really loved to have included a Bob Marley album here. That's one of the suggestions, you know. And at the time, you know, reggae was a niche. Buying public were buying it at the time when Bob was alive. Of course, he's revered in a completely different way now. I would have picked probably Exodus, you know, it's a great album it is. But it was bought at the time by a niche number of people that liked reggae. But as we know, you know, I mean, you look at Legend, his album Legend, how many copies of that sold now? Quite right too, as well. Okay, right. It's been long enough, guys and girls. I hope you are all well and that you're taking care of yourselves, and that some of you are able to get out and enjoy this lovely weather lately that we've been having. Try and get some fresh air. So I wish you all the best, and maybe tomorrow, if you want to come and watch me, I'm going to do exactly the same again, but this time with the 80s. Just a bit of fun, isn't it? And if you all like what I do, just write whatever comments you want, and I will respond to them. Okay. Have a great day, everybody, and hope to see you again. Bye-bye.